Today we're going to talk more about the Civil War and about what it means. And I hope that what I'm going to say is something you haven't heard before. I hope it's a little surprising. I'm going to suggest a way to think about American history, about the story of America, that's not the story we usually tell ourselves. I'm not saying that it's the only way to think about our history, but I am saying it's worth considering. So, the Civil War. What is the Civil War? One thing it is an act of treason. The Constitution says that. Making war against the United States is treason. But remember, the Declaration of Independence was treason. The founding, I said, was sort of treason too, but there was no real sovereign to commit treason against. The founders only had to worry about Rhode Island. And that was farce. This time, it's tragedy. This time, it's war. In many ways, the Civil War is like a second American Revolution, and also like a second founding. Here's how. It starts with something very similar to the Declaration of Independence. The secession letters of the southern states resemble the Declaration in important ways. The Declaration, remember, had two things. It had a statement of values. All men are created equal and are endowed by their Creator with unalienable rights, like liberty. And then it had a political theory. People give power to the government, and if it fails to protect their rights, they can take that power back. They can alter or abolish their form of government. The secession letters take the same form. Frequently, in fact, they rely on the Declaration. Now, their statement of values is different. They don't say equality, they say inequality. They don't say liberty, they say slavery. But they have a similar political theory. The states gave power to the federal government. Things didn't work out, and we're taking it back. Now, does that violate the Constitution? It's not clear. The argument would be, no, the states didn't give power to the federal government, the people did. And states can't take back what was never theirs. The political visions that clash in the Civil War are really about who is the highest authority in our system. Is it the states, as the Confederates argue, or is it the people, as Lincoln claims? Setting that aside for the moment, secession certainly doesn't violate the Constitution as clearly as the Constitution itself violated the Articles of Confederation. The Articles, remember, said the Union would be perpetual. They said the Articles could be changed only by unanimous vote. The Constitution does not say explicitly that states can't secede. So what the secessionists are doing is very much like the Declaration, very much like the founding. And if the South had won, people in that new nation, the Confederate States of America, would look on those secession letters as the Declaration of Independence for the Second American Revolution. But the South didn't win. We got a second founding anyway. That's one of my big points today. But it wasn't the one the secessionists wanted. It was, in many ways, the opposite. What's the equivalent of the Declaration for this second founding? It's the Gettysburg Address. Like the Declaration, this has a statement of values. Equality, Lincoln says.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure.
That's the value to which the nation is dedicated. And what's his political theory? It's that the people are sovereign, not the states, and that the federal government represents the people. That's what he's talking about at the end. That's the government that is of the people, by the people, for the people, the federal government. This is, you should notice, almost the opposite of the theory of the Revolution. The theory of the Revolution is what I called the first lesson of American history, that the general government is a threat to liberty, and the states are its protectors. That's the idea of the Founders' Constitution, too. That's what the Second Amendment is about, states standing up against the tyrannical federal government. And that's the idea of the secessionists. That's what they think they're doing. Lincoln's theory is instead that the federal government can protect liberty. It can protect people from the states. The Founders' Constitution doesn't do this, but the Reconstruction Constitution will. That's the new birth of freedom that the Gettysburg Address promises, the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th. These amendments constitute a second founding. They give us a very different Constitution than the one the founders imagined. But just like the founders' Constitution, the Reconstruction Constitution comes to us in an irregular way, possibly an illegal one. The defeated Southern states accepted the 13th Amendment, but they didn't want the 14th. It passed Congress only because the Southern senators and representatives had been excluded. When Southern state legislatures refused to ratify it, Congress dissolved them. It put the South under military control. And the new constitutional vision that Congress forces on the South is the Reconstruction vision, the third lesson of American history. States may oppress their citizens, and the federal government will intervene to protect them. The federal government now is the good guys. So what does all this mean? Here's my surprising suggestion. We like to say that the Constitution is a success, that it served us well for over 200 years. But I want to suggest that actually the Founders' Constitution was in significant ways a failure. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. It's supposed to form a more perfect union, but 11 states secede. It's supposed to ensure domestic tranquility, but Americans kill Americans, 750,000 of them. That's not success. We don't like to say this. We like to think of American history as a success story. We look back to the Declaration in 1776, to the Founders in 1789. We imagine a line that connects us to those great figures of our history, whose wisdom still guides us, whose examples still inspire. But the Civil War is a pretty significant break in that line. The Civil War is a rejection of the signers' idea that people can always decide to change their government. It's a rejection of the founders' idea that the states are the primary protectors of liberty. After the Civil War, it's going to be the federal government. It's going to be, for a while, federal troops in the occupied South. So our Constitution now is different. The Constitution we live under, in theory and in practice, is the Reconstruction Constitution. Think about the big cases that define constitutional law, the ones we talk about in this course. The ones we've seen: Gideon, Mapp, Miranda, Tinker. The ones that are coming up: Brown v. Board of Education, Roe v. Wade. What do all these cases have in common? They all could never have arisen, they could never have been decided under the Founders' Constitution. They are all 14th Amendment cases, federal rights against the states. So our Constitution, the cases we talk about, the rights we cherish, is not the Founders' Constitution. And we haven't had it for over 200 years. We've had it for about 140. And some of the most important parts of it didn't really get enforced until about 60 years ago. The nation broke apart in the Civil War, and then it came back together. And now everyone loves the Constitution. But when people look at the Constitution, they see different things. We have basically three different constitutional visions, which correspond to the three big lessons of American history. There's the Constitution of the Declaration and the Revolution, the spirit of 1776. This is really the Articles of Confederation. There's the Constitution of Philadelphia in 1789. That's the Founders' Constitution. And there's the Constitution of Gettysburg in 1868, the Reconstruction Constitution. What differentiates these visions is basically how they think about the states and the federal government. 1776 says the federal government is dangerous. The states are good. They'll protect people. 1789 says the states are still good, but they need to be controlled. And 1868 says the states are dangerous. The federal government is good. All of these visions are available. They're all part of our history. And that means that you need to choose which one you're going to identify with. The conventional answer is 1776 or 1789, the Declaration and the founding. But what I'm saying to you now is those are not the only answers, and they are maybe not even the most persuasive ones. When you think of our constitutional heroes, the people who gave us our rights, you have a choice. You can look to the Sons of Liberty, the Minutemen, the Framers, or you could look to Union soldiers.